In the kingdom of Ondo, King Abaye and Queen Morenike ruled with firm hands, their power undeniable. But as their reign extended over the years, one thing remained missing: a child, an heir to continue their dynasty. This failure to produce an heir weighed heavily on the royal couple, casting a shadow over their otherwise prosperous kingdom. The tension between them grew as they faced the whispers in the court, the silent judgments of nobles who questioned their ability to continue their line. King Abaye, proud and unyielding, focused on maintaining his grip over the kingdom through military might and fear, while Queen Morenike, sharp-tongued and even more ruthless, took the matter of an heir personally. Her frustration festered, turning her once beautiful heart into a hardened stone. She feared the loss of their legacy more than anything and grew resentful of her own body for failing to provide a child. One night, in the heat of her frustration, Morenike approached the king with a plan. "If I cannot bear an heir, we shall take one," she declared, her eyes blazing with a dangerous resolve. "Take one of the slaves' wives, force her to bear a son for us." Her words were cold, calculated, but behind them, a raw desperation rang through. King Abaye, although initially hesitant, saw the practicality of the queen's suggestion. As rulers, their bloodline needed continuation, even if it meant breaking moral boundaries. Without a word of protest, he agreed. A terrible decision had been made, one that would set the kingdom on a path toward ruin. Among the slaves, Sua stood out for her grace and beauty. She was strong, intelligent, and well-liked among the enslaved. She had a loving husband, Abaye, with whom she shared her simple life. They had each other and the small joys they could create amidst the oppression of palace life. But their happiness was shattered when Sua was chosen by the king to bear his child. The day the guards came to take her, Abaye could do nothing but watch, helpless, as his wife was dragged away. His heart broke as the woman he loved, the mother of his unborn dreams, was torn from his arms and forced into the king's bedchamber. Sua, strong as she was, had no power to resist. The king's orders were law, and to refuse was death. That night, a great injustice was done, and the kingdom's fate began to unravel. Sua's spirit withered under the weight of her grief, but she bore the king's child. The pregnancy was difficult, and Sua's health declined rapidly, as if the child itself was draining her life force. In her final hours, she delivered a healthy baby boy but did not survive the birth. The king, holding the child in his arms, declared him his son and heir, naming him Eden, after the mythical paradise of old. Queen Morenike, though overjoyed to finally have a son, looked upon the child with mixed emotions. She resented the fact that the boy was not truly hers, that the kingdom would remember the child came from a slave. Eden grew up in the palace, surrounded by luxury, but also by secrets and lies. He was told he was the royal heir, but his lineage was whispered about in the corridors. The nobles knew the truth, and the slaves who had known Sua could only look at Eden with a mixture of sadness and hope. For them, he was the son of one of their own, a living reminder of Sua's sacrifice. But for the palace, Eden was a prize, a future king who needed to be molded into a ruler as strong and fearsome as his father. From an early age, Eden was trained in the arts of war, politics, and royal etiquette. King Abaye drilled into him the importance of power, teaching him that a king's strength came from fear and control. Queen Morenike, bitter and cold, taught him the ruthlessness required to rule a kingdom. "The throne does not allow kindness, Eden," she would say. "Compassion is a weakness that will see you dethroned." Yet, despite their efforts, Eden's heart could not fully embrace their harsh lessons. As he grew older, he began to notice the suffering of the people, especially the slaves who toiled day and night in the fields and within the palace walls. He felt a strange connection to them, an unspoken bond that he could not explain. Their pain stirred something deep inside him, something his parents' teachings could not suppress. One day, while walking through the palace gardens, Eden saw a young slave being beaten by a guard for stealing a loaf of bread. The boy's cries echoed through the air, and something in Eden snapped. He rushed forward, stopping the guard's hand mid-swing. "Enough," Eden commanded, his voice trembling with anger. "This is not justice." The guard hesitated, unsure whether to defy the prince or continue with his orders. News of the incident quickly reached Queen Morenike, who scolded Eden fiercely for his display of compassion. "You are weak," she hissed. "A king who shows mercy will lose his throne. Remember that." But Eden could not shake the feeling that his parents were wrong. The kingdom was filled with pain, and the suffering of the people weighed heavily on his heart. Yet he remained torn. Loyalty to his parents and his royal duty clashed with the empathy he felt for those less fortunate. As Eden grew into a young man, unrest began to stir in the kingdom. The slaves had suffered under the harsh rule of King Abaye and Queen Morenike for far too long. They had seen Shua die bearing the king's child, and they had felt the sting of their whips for generations. Among them, Abaye, Shua's widower, quietly nurtured the seeds of rebellion. He had never forgotten the injustice done to his wife, and now he was determined to avenge her death. In the shadows, Abaye gathered those who were brave enough to stand against the crown. The rebellion grew in secret, fueled by years of suffering and the desire for freedom. Abaye knew that the only way to bring justice to the kingdom was to overthrow the king and queen. He swore that their reign would end, and Eden, though Shua's son, would be caught in the crossfire if he stood in their way. Despite the growing unrest, Eden remained loyal to his parents, even though his heart continued to battle with his mind. He sensed the tension in the air, the whispers of discontent that spread like wildfire through the kingdom, but he could not bring himself to betray the parents who had raised him. One stormy night, the rebellion erupted into full-scale war. Armed with nothing but crude weapons and the strength of their fury, the slaves stormed the palace, their shouts piercing the darkness. The kingdom that had once known peace now trembled under the weight of its sins. King Abaye, though aging, took up his sword and defended his throne with all the ferocity of his youth. Queen Morenike fought by his side, her heart filled with rage at the betrayal of the people she had ruled. But the rebellion was strong, and the slaves, led by Abaye, fought with the strength of those who had been oppressed for too long. Amid the chaos, Eden found himself torn between the two worlds. His parents needed him to defend the throne, but the cries of the slaves, his people, pulled at his heart. He fought alongside the king and queen, using the skills they had taught him, but each swing of his sword felt heavier than the last. Then, in a moment of tragedy, King Abaye was struck down and fatally wounded while trying to protect Queen Morenike. As the king lay dying, he looked up at Eden and whispered his final command, "Protect your mother. Rule with strength." With those words, the weight of the kingdom fell on Eden's shoulders. After the battle, the rebellion ended with the death of King Abaye. Queen Morenike, grief-stricken and filled with guilt, surrendered to her own sorrow. The kingdom was broken, and the people awaited Eden's next move. But instead of continuing his parents' reign of terror, Eden made a different choice. He spared his mother's life, but he could not allow her to continue ruling. He took the throne himself, vowing to change the way the kingdom was run. Eden freed the slaves, granting them their long-deserved freedom and equal rights. He worked tirelessly to heal the wounds of the kingdom, rebuilding trust and unity where there had once been division and pain. Under Eden's reign, Ondo flourished. He became known as the kind king, a ruler who understood that true power came from love and respect, not fear. Though his parents' reign had been one of cruelty and oppression, Eden's legacy was one of justice and compassion. Eden, his internal struggle between the loyalty to his parents and the empathy he feels for the oppressed drives the narrative. He is shaped by his upbringing but ultimately finds his own path, demonstrating that one's heart can overcome even the darkest of legacies. King Abaye, a man consumed by power, Abaye believes that ruling through fear is the only way to maintain control. His tragic end reflects the downfall of oppression. Initially a woman driven by desperation for an heir, her ambition slowly transforms her into a cold and ruthless ruler. Her inner conflict stems from her deep-seated fear of losing her legacy. Even after finally securing a son, she is unable to embrace him fully due to the circumstances of his birth. Her downfall is a reflection of the cost of sacrificing morality for power. Beo Shua's widower, Beo becomes a symbol of resistance and the voice of the oppressed. His journey is driven by grief and the desire for justice, both for his wife and the enslaved people. Though he fights for freedom, his hatred for the king and queen is personal, and he struggles with the line between justice and revenge. Shua's presence lingers. She represents the cost of cruelty and the humanity that is often sacrificed by the powerful. Her legacy lives on through Eden, her son, whose compassionate heart echoes the kindness she embodied during her life. Though Eden ascended the throne with noble intentions, his path to becoming the kind king was not without challenges. In the first weeks of his rule, he was plagued by doubt. The bloodshed from the rebellion haunted his dreams, and the weight of his father's final words echoed in his mind, "Rule with strength." The palace, now quiet after the chaos of battle, felt empty. Queen Morenike retreated to her private chambers, consumed by grief and bitterness. She refused to acknowledge Eden's authority, viewing him as weak for sparing the rebels and releasing the slaves. "You are no son of mine," she spat during one of their rare conversations. "You've betrayed everything your father and I built." Eden's heart ached for the love of his mother, but he could not allow her hatred to poison his rule. He sought counsel from the elders, the few who remained loyal not to the throne, but to the well-being of the kingdom. They reminded him that strength does not come solely from dominance. True strength, they said, lies in the courage to do what is right, even when it's hard. But the scars of his upbringing, the pressure to be strong in the way his parents had taught him, lingered in Eden's soul. Would the people respect him if he ruled with kindness? Could he lead the kingdom into prosperity, or was he destined to repeat his parents' mistakes? Healing the kingdom ***. Despite his doubts, Eden knew that change was necessary. The kingdom had been broken under the weight of fear, and its people were divided. The nobles and palace elites resented the loss of their privileges, while the former slaves, though free, remained cautious of their new king. Many believed that Eden was merely a continuation of the old regime, waiting for the right moment to enforce his power. Eden's first task was to rebuild trust between the people and the throne. He began by inviting former slaves into positions of authority, appointing them as advisors and governors over the regions that had once been ruled with an iron fist. Beo, though initially distrustful of Eden, was granted a place in the royal council. This was a symbolic gesture, not just to honor Sua's memory, but to show that the time of oppression was over. But not everyone was pleased with these changes. Many of the kingdom's elites viewed Eden's decisions as a betrayal. They whispered behind closed doors, conspiring to undermine the new king. "This boy," they would say, "will be the end of Ondo's greatness." Eden, aware of the growing unrest among the nobility, refused to be deterred. He knew that real change would require time and patience, and he was willing to fight for the future of his kingdom, even if it meant losing the support of those who had once served his parents. As Eden worked to rebuild the kingdom, Queen Morenike's resentment grew into a seething rage. She could not accept that her son, the heir she had fought so hard to secure, was turning away from the legacy she and Abaye had created. In her eyes, Eden's compassion was weakness, and his decisions would only bring ruin to the throne. The queen began to conspire with the discontented nobles, quietly planning to overthrow her own son. "He is not fit to rule," she whispered to them in the dark corners of the palace. "If we do not act soon, the kingdom will fall into chaos." Eden, however, remained focused on his vision. Though he longed for his mother's approval, he understood that her time had passed. She could not see the future he envisioned, one where the people were united, where power came not from fear but from mutual respect. And yet, he hesitated to act against her, bound by the love he still held for her, even after everything. As Eden's reforms began to take root, tension within the palace reached a boiling point. The nobles, led by Queen Morenike, plotted in secret to remove Eden from the throne and install one of their own, someone who would return the kingdom to its former state of control and fear. Morenike, desperate to reclaim her power, saw no other option. One night, as Eden sat alone in his study, reflecting on the growing discontent, a trusted guard entered the room, his face pale with fear. "Your Majesty," he said, voice trembling, "there is a plot against you. The queen, your mother, she leads it." Eden's heart sank. Though he had expected opposition from the nobles, he had not anticipated that his own mother would turn against him. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he had suffered in battle. For a moment he considered confronting her, begging her to see reason, but he knew it was too late. Morenike was lost to her thirst for power. The next day, Eden acted swiftly. He summoned the conspirators to the royal hall, where he publicly denounced their plot. With great sorrow, he banished his mother from the kingdom, sending her to live in exile far from the palace she had once ruled. It was one of the hardest decisions he had ever made, but Eden knew that for the kingdom to heal, the remnants of his parents' tyranny had to be removed. Chapter 11: Redemption and Renewal. With Queen Morenike gone and the nobles' rebellion quelled, Eden turned his attention fully to the people. His reforms, once met with resistance, began to take hold. The former slaves, now free citizens, flourished under Eden's new policies. Trade blossomed as the once oppressed found new opportunities to thrive. But Eden did not seek redemption only for his kingdom, he sought it for himself. He visited the villages of the freed people, listening to their stories, learning about their struggles, and taking their wisdom to heart. He knew that his parents' reign had left deep scars, and he worked tirelessly to mend them. Through his actions, Eden slowly won the hearts of his people. They began to see him not as the son of a tyrant, but as a king who truly cared for their well-being. His compassion became his greatest strength, and the kingdom of Ondo was reborn under his rule. Years passed, and under King Eden's leadership, the kingdom of Ondo entered a golden age. The divisions between the nobles and the common people were mended, and the kingdom grew stronger than it had ever been. The people loved their king, not out of fear, but out of genuine respect and admiration. Eden's reign was remembered not for the bloodshed of his parents, but for the peace and prosperity he brought to the land. His legacy was one of kindness, justice, and the power of redemption. In the end, Eden proved that a ruler's true strength lies not in cruelty or fear, but in the courage to change, to heal, and to lead with a compassionate heart. Eden's journey is one of internal conflict and growth. Torn between the ruthless teachings of his parents and his own innate compassion, he ultimately forges his own path as a ruler. His redemption lies not just in freeing the slaves, but in proving that kindness and strength can coexist in a leader. Queen Morenike, consumed by bitterness, represents the dangers of power when it becomes disconnected from humanity. Her downfall is a result of her inability to evolve with the times, leaving her isolated and exiled in the end. Abaye, once driven by revenge, finds peace in seeing Eden take the throne and bring justice to the kingdom. He too learns that true justice comes not from vengeance, but from rebuilding and healing a broken system. Moral lessons. 1. True leadership comes from compassion, not fear. Eden's journey shows that power built on empathy creates lasting change, while tyranny or oppression only leads to destruction. 2. Redemption is possible, even after great mistakes. Despite his parents' cruelty, Eden chooses a different path, proving that we are not bound by the mistakes of our past. 3. The greatest strength lies in the courage to change. Eden's transformation from a conflicted prince to a just king demonstrates that the ability to grow and adapt is the mark of true greatness. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks.